Hi, welcome to Aran Makes Designs, where today I'm going to show you how to make this cute, pudgy little gingerbread man using your 46 or 48 pin circular knitting machine. Let's get going. To make the little gingerbread man, you are going to need a 46 or 48 pin circular knitting machine. This one is the Addi Express Kingsize by Addi, but you can use any machine that you have. A pair of scissors, some straight pins, a little needle for sewing on your buttons if you choose to use buttons, a darning needle, some buttons for the buttons. This is a 15mm safety eye, some filling of your choice. I'm using polyfill today, some thread for sewing on the buttons. This is a DK cotton sport weight yarn that I like to use for the embroidery. Some Aran worsted weight yarn in brown and white. This is Women Institute Soft and Simple, available at Hobbycraft, but that's a UK-based yarn. And this is Karen Simply Soft in white. And this is just from my stash. This is a DK in this lovely soft pink, which I've used for the cheeks. Before we get started on making our tube, I want to show you what you're going to be making. So this is the cast on end of our tube, and our tube is 80 rows in total. But you are going to cast on and knit 16 rows in the brown. Then you will do a color change to white. You will then color change back to brown and knit another 13 rows. You will then do a color change to white again and do 1 row. And then you are going to change back to the brown and you are going to knit a total of 49 rows in the brown. And this will be our cast off end. The cast on end is going to be the top of our head. And then we are going to turn this inside out to get a double layer, just like we would when making a hat. And this bottom part here will be where our legs are. So if you are comfortable with using your knitting machine with casting on and off, just in a basic cast on off, you can, and doing color changes, you can pause the video now, do your work on the machine, and I'll meet you back and ready to do the construction. Or you can stay with me and move to the next section where we are going to be doing the work on the machine together. Right, see you shortly. To start, we're going to cast on with our brown. This is going to be the top of the gingerbread man. And we are going to knit 16 rows in brown, and then we're going to switch over and do a color change to white. So let's get going and get this cast on. Remember when you're casting on to move your yarn in front and behind of each pin all the way around. I'll meet you once you have your yarn cast on. There they are. I'm going to pop that back in my yarn feeder. And now I'm going to reset my counter. I always reset my counter once I have cast on. And I'm going to knit 16 rounds in the brown. You can pause your video here and I'll meet you once you have 16 rows knitted on your machine. And there, that's 16 rows. And I'm just going to cut my brown there and swap over and do a color change to white. And with the white, remember when doing color changes, take your yarn, your working yarn that you just used, cut it, drop it down inside the center of the circle there. It is caught under the last pin. Put your new working yarn in, place it under the first pin, and put it inside. And we are doing just 1 row of the white. And there we go. I'm going to cut that, place it back in, take my brown again, make sure it's underneath the first pin, put that in the center. And now I'm going to knit myself another, some quick math being done in my head here, another 13 rows in the brown until I have 30 rows in total on the machine. And that's going to make up from the neck here until we get down to the legs where we're going to do another little bit of icing row. So that's going to be another 17 rows, so that I have 30 rows in total on the machine. Now I'm just going to say before we get going, normally I like to tie my color changes while on the machine, but I'm not going to this time because there's not much tension going to be between these color changes here because it's only a single row of white. So I will wait to tie my color changes until I have the tube off the machine. Right, we're going to go ahead and now knit another 13 rows, and I will meet you back here when you have 30 rows in total done, and we're ready to do another color change. And there we go. I now have 30 rows in total, and I'm just going to do this last color change here to do the detail on the leg. Take my working yarn out, place it down inside, take my white, make sure it goes under that first pin. I'm going to knit 1 row, and then I'm going to change back to the brown, and then I'm going to knit until I have 80 rows in total on the machine. There we go. Change over to this, back to the brown. And again, just like before, I am not tying my color changes while the work is on the machine. I'll wait to do that at the end. And now I'm going to knit until we have 80 rows in total on the machine. And there we go. We have 80 rows on the machine. And now I'm going to cut myself a generous tail. And I am going to just do a basic cast off where I release the live stitches and pick them up with the needle. I like to go almost all the way around, making sure that I'm not dropping the stitch from the first pin here off the machine. And then I go around and I pick up 1 stitch at a time for the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 to help release some of the tension along here. And then once I have those picked up, I'll then go around and pick up a few at a time until I can then pick up lots. And you'll see what I do each time to make sure I don't accidentally pull a live stitch off is I hold the next stitch just in place there until I'm ready to pick it up. And then that ensures I don't get, I don't lose any of my stitches and end up dropping them. Right, I will meet you when you have your tube off the machine. Now, before I cinch my ends closed, I need to remember that I need to go in and tie off these color changes, and I'm going to do that when my table is flat, so I can really ensure that I'm not pulling these stitches too tight when I tie them. To tie our color changes, to make sure that we don't have a tight stitch there, we need to turn our work inside out. I don't need to turn the whole thing, just turn it like this. When it comes to tying off my tails of my color changes, I like to work from the bottom up. I don't really know why that it does this, but I find that if I start at the bottom stitches, it's able to pull everything in much neater and I'm able to see it better. So you're going to pull your tails until the stitches that you're pulling, that the tails are connected to, you can see it's this one here and this one. You're going to pull until they are about the same length as to all the stitches around them. And then I'm going to tie a double knot. Don't tie it too tight. You don't want to distort those stitches that you're creating there. And I'm going to leave my tails nice and long because when my work is done, I'm going to fish these tails out and then pull them through the work, through the body of the gingerbread man to hide them inside. And then I'm just going to do the same thing here, pull these tails up until they look about, the stitches look to be the same length as the ones around, and then tie a double knot. And I'm going to do the same with the 2 sets of tails above. Perfect. Now that we have those on, we can have a look and we can see that the stitches are about the same size. I didn't pull anything too tight. Now what has happened here? Oh, that's just the knot wanting to pop through. That's okay. Again, that's why I've asked you to keep your tails long, because I will show you how we can hide that so that that knot doesn't pop out. And now we're just going to turn our work into itself to form a hat. Now we have to remember that this is the outside of our gingerbread man body, and this is going to be the inside. So let's pull that into itself here. Give this a nice big tight tug. I'm not so concerned about this section here, the inside, having a nice tight closure, but I am when it comes to this outside. And so I'm going to show you now, just make sure that that tail's out. That's going to be in. I'm going to show you now how to make sure that this end, our top part, our cinch closure, has a nice tight closing, because what usually happens is we pull, and that always wants to open a little bit up. And we can either break our yarn by pulling too tight, or we get fed up, and then we leave it a little bit open, or we have to do a bit of stitching at the end. Well, I'm going to show you now what you can do to prevent that from happening. And you can do this when you are working on your hats as well. So put that tail, the outside tail, back onto your needle. You're just going to have to ignore this tail for now. Please don't cut it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way around that opening, and I am going to pick up every other stitch that is on, that's here. So I'll pick up the first one, skip this one, pick up the next one, skip, pick it up, skip it, pick it up. You get it? You don't need to watch me do the whole thing. So you can pause your video now, and I'll see you once you've gotten all the way around, picking up every other stitch. And there I am, I'm back around again. And then I like to keep my fingers inside. I'm going to pull, and I can feel that both of those rounds are starting to pull. And I'll just keep pulling, making sure that I'm not going to tear it. And there we go, look at that. Isn't that a nice closed end? And then I'll just take that tail from the inside layer, give it a nice tug, tie these off securely. A good double knot. And then get this. Sorry, there's so many tails. The tails are so long here, but I want to keep them long because I will use these pieces in the sewing of my gingerbread man. Just going to pop that one back onto the needle, and just like we're making a hat, but I can bring it. Unlike a hat, I don't need to hide it within the layers. I can just bring it right back into the center here. Pull it firmly to make sure that the knot has come through, and there it is there. And I have a nice tight closure at the top of my gingerbread man. And the next thing we're going to move on to is filling and the beginning of the construction of the body. Well, I was about to do what I always do, which is forget to put the safety eyes in. So thankfully, I haven't, I caught myself before we moved on. So we're going to put the safety eyes in, and then we are going to put the filling in, and we will seal up the bottom of our gingerbread man. I'm going to take one of these knitting blocking pins, but you don't need to have one of these. You can use any one you want. And I'm going to find the center column of my front, and that is going to be my guide to make sure that I am placing my eyes, my cheeks, my face, everything evenly across. And I'm going to mark off 3 columns on each side of this pin. 1, 2, 3. And I like to mark my column first and then count down from the top. And I am counting down 9 rows from the top. So let's come up to the top here. Find the column I'm counting in. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Perfect. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. And then I'm just going to have a look to see, have they come out in the same row. And now I am going to put in my safety eyes. Make sure it goes through to both sides nicely. And I'll put that backing on, just so that I can take it off if I want to. I'm not putting it fully on because I just want to check and make sure I'm happy with where the eyes are, where they're placed. I don't often use safety eyes on my work unless I know for sure that a young child isn't going to be playing with it, because they can of course be choking hazards, but I'll leave you to make your judgment call on that. Perfect. I'm just going to come back over to the other side here and press down firmly, and same with this one. Just have a look. Great. And now we're ready to fill the body of our gingerbread man. Before I fill the body, I am going to cut these tails. Now I am not going to cut them too short. I find that if you cut them really short, then you run more of a chance of these tails popping through and out. whereas if you leave them longer, they get caught up in all of the filling and they don't come out easily. But I am going to put these tails aside because I will be using that for closing the bottom and for stitching the details on the arms and legs. There we are. And now I like to take my filling and pull it apart just to fluff it up a bit and so that I don't have any chunks. And I'm going to start filling it. And I want to make sure that I'm really pressing it firmly into the top here. I find that also helps with the ridges. Now, filling a stuffed toy takes a little bit of paying attention to, I find. And that's because if you put too much in, it will stretch your stitches out of shape, and that doesn't look very good. If you put too little in, you can definitely tell, and it starts to look quite floppy. So you really have to be paying attention to what you're doing. And of course, add and take away as you need. So I'm going to pause the video here. I'm going to get my gingerbread man filled, and I'll meet you back here when you are ready to seal up the end. Okay, I feel like I have enough polyfill in here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a drawstring to go around the opening here that will close off the body of the gingerbread man. I'm using one of my tails, which is nice and long. I'm going to start at the back here, and to create the drawstring, what I will do is I'll make my way all the way around this edge of the opening, and I'm going to pick up every other stitch of each of those, pardon me, not every other stitch, I'm going to pick up every other leg of each stitch. So I'll pick up that one, skip that next leg, pick up this one, just like we did when we were closing off the top, and I'm going to make my way all the way around, picking up every other leg. Now, you can pause the video here and join me once you've done that, but do not tie off because I'm going to show you what I do to make sure that as we're pulling it, it doesn't slip. So pause your video now and I'll see you when you have every other leg of each stitch on your needle picked up. And there we are. I have picked up every other leg, and I'll show you why I'm not going to close it now. When I pull this, it wants to open back up. So we're going to have the same problem at this end down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to go around a second time, and just like we did on the closure of the top of the gingerbread man, I'm going to go around and I'm going to pick up every other one of the legs that I just picked up. So I've picked up the first one, I'm going to skip that one, pick up the next one, skip that one, pick up this one. You get it? You can pause the video now, and I will see you once you have all of them picked up, but don't close it because you're going to want to make sure that you have the right amount of filling inside your body. And here we are. I'm just at my last one. I have one more stitch which I am meant to skip, but I am going to pick it up so that my tails are right beside each other. Now, before I close this completely, I'm going to stop and have a look to see if I am happy with the amount of filling I have in here. Now I have to remember that I'm going to be doing some shaping to create the arms, which is going to pull my knitting a bit, and I'm going to do some shaping to create the legs, which again is going to pull my knitting. So I feel that I have just a little bit too much filling in here because I'm not making a giant potato that is shapeless. And let's check again there. Legs might take out just a tiny bit more. And that is why we don't close off our end straight away. Now, it's time to pull those tails, pull them both together, and you will see that it comes together and there is no slipping of that. And I'm going to tie myself a nice tight knot, but I am not going to cut these tails because I am going to use them for shaping the legs. And there we go. We have what looks like a massive potato. And now it's time to turn our gingerbread potato into a gingerbread man. And really, this is going to be the extent of the sewing we do on this project. I was really excited about designing this project because I wanted to make something that was made using just the one machine and used minimal sewing so that you could have something that's nice and easy to make for Christmas. But that looks really good. Right, I am just going to find that middle row of stitches that middle column of stitches. Use a couple of pins here to mark all the way down. There we go. And again, I love marking things out with pins because it allows me to make sure that my work looks even and neat. So I'm going to take one of the tails. I'm going to start at the front. So this tail is the one that's sitting more forward of the other one. So I'm going to take it and I am going to bring it into the body to create the legs. And here I have the icing detail along the bottom of my legs, and I am going to count up from there. 1, so I'm counting into the brown stitches, 1, 2, 3, and this is going to be the top of my legs, and I'm going to bring my needle in, turn my potato over, and this is going to be the center that I'm working into on the back, so I'll just mark that off, the center column, and I'm going to bring my needle through, I have to squash it a bit, 1, 2, 3 stitches up from the icing detail there. So I'll just pull that and we'll come back to the front. Good. And now I'm going to take the other tail. Of course, if you didn't leave your tails long enough, you can grab yourself a long piece of yarn and do this with that. And I'm going to bring my needle back in. Careful not to snag that as you're going in because you're going to want to be able to pull it. And I'm going to bring my needle out just where I came in on the other side. There we are. Now, what we're going to do now is we are going to pull these tails, and this is going to give us a shaping for our legs. But I find to keep, let's get those pins out of there. We don't need them there now, just be in our way. I find to get my shaping as neat as can be is I want to make sure that my yarn is following that center column of stitches all the way up, that it's not crossing over any of the other columns. Give that this one here, and you can see how neatly that pulls in. And don't worry about this, we will pull this all out and neaten it up when we're done. And just check to make sure the one on the back, look, it crossed over. So I'll just pull. You can see it's come from over here and it's crossed over. So I'm just going to move the knitting so that that tail, here it is here, is running up the center of that column of stitches. Let's give everything a pull. We have our little legs formed. And I'm going to bring these together at the bottom. Tie them snugly. Keep checking each time that you're happy with the work that you're doing. Another little bit of a snug. And I am going to tie myself a couple of knots and then place these tails back onto my needle and then pull them through the body of the gingerbread man to hide them. There we go. Bring them up and out the back. I bought myself a really long doll making darning needle and I was so excited for it to come, but it's not really good. It's not a nice quality tool, so I'm stuck still using this shorter one. If any of you have a doll darning needle that you would recommend, please let me know because I'm not happy with the one that I bought. And I'm not going to say who I bought it from. They're a small business and I don't want to do that to them just because I'm not happy with something like that. Okay, there. Now our potato has some legs and I can pull some of my filling down, massage it down a bit to fill out the legs a little bit more. And there we are. And next we're going to move on to shaping the arms. I think I said I was going to shape the arms next. This isn't a potato, this is a gingerbread man, and he has a head. So now we need to make his and shape his neck. So I'm going to take this other long tail of mine. Sorry about that. Although I might just edit that out, but I won't. I'll keep that in. Right, I'm going to flip over to the back here and I'm going to find the center. It's really easy to find because I have that little jog, but don't worry, That's going to get nicely hidden once we shape the neck. And also it's at the back of the work. And this is been, as I said, knitted in the round. And even if you were knitting in the round on circular knitting needles, you'd still get a jog. Right, I'm going to come along and I am going to find the row that is above my white stitches. And I am going to pick up, just like we did at the bottom here, every other leg of each stitch. And I'm going to make my way all the way around doing that. So you don't need to watch me do that. You can pause your video here and I will see you once we have every other leg of each stitch picked up. And there we are. I have every other leg of each stitch picked up, and I'm just going to come down because I want my tails to be beside one another. I, of course, because I have moved around, I'm now one stitch above. I'm going to come down and pick up the leg of the stitch that's right next to my tail. Okay, and then I'm going to pull those together until I am happy. I think you look so funny at this point. Almost like a squid or something, a gingerbread squid. I'm going to pull my tails until I am happy with my head and the neck there. Now, this is where it becomes tricky because look, every time I pull it, it's going to slip back. So what I do is I twist the tails. Good. And I've twisted my tails there, one little pull, tie them together. Before I tie my knot, I'm just going to make sure that I am happy with that. Yes. It somewhat resembles the gingerbread man that my husband makes with my children. He does that every Christmas. I think it's very sweet. There we go. Tied a double knot. And like always, I'm going to take these tails and hide them inside. And keep them for shaping the arms. Okay, and we're going to pause there. Well, let's have a look at our head, see if we're happy with that. We can always massage up some of the filling from in the body to come up into the head a bit, to fill the head up some more. Oh, I'm glad I did that. And that solves two issues there. It gives more filling up in the head, but it also allows me a little more give across the knitting down here to form my arms. Right, now right at the very beginning there, I had said to you, don't cut your tails from your color changes too short. And I'm going to show you now why I said that. Look, you can see them all snaking through the work. Can you see that? Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully you can. I can see them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to where they start and pull them out to the outside so that I can see them. The brown ones don't really matter that much, but it's these white ones that I don't want to show. And then what I'm going to do is just put them onto the needle, bring them inside, and like every other tail, hide them. Oh, that one will just hide itself. Cut this one, and there. Okay, now I'm going to do the same to the bottom here, but you don't need to watch me do that. And those tails now, I can't see them, and it makes the work look much neater. And now we are going to move on to doing the arms. When it comes to shaping the arms, we're going to do a little bit of eyeballing. So I'm going to turn my body to the side, and like I did with the center, I'm going to find myself a center column of stitches. And I'm going to use this one here. Now, these stitches happen to be pointing upwards. That doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that when I am counting my columns over, that I'm counting them so that the column looks the same. So all of these stitches are pointing upwards, and so those are the columns that I'm counting off to the side. And I'm going to count 3 columns over on each side of this center column. So there's 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to mark that off. And I'll do the same on the other side. 1, 2, 3. Pop it in there so I can see what I'm doing. There. And this is where the shaping of our arm comes in. Now, where do I start to create the little armpit? Well, what I've done on this one is I have counted down 7 stitches from the top, and then I've carried on and counted down another 3. So we have 10 stitches to reach the bottom of the arm here, and we have 7 stitches down to reach the top of the armpit here. So I'll take one of my long tails there, put it on, come over to the back. I always enter in at the back of the work, and I am going to count down. Just move that up. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way upwards. So I'm going to count down 10 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that is where I'm going to bring my needle out. And all I'm going to do is do what I would consider to be a running stitch. I'm going to come up and just go into the next stitch above, and I'm going to come over to the other side, and I'm going to come in at 10 stitches down. 1, 2. I can't see them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Bring my needle out in the same spot. Come up and over into the next stitch up. Come back to this side, and I'm going to go back and forth all the way up. Don't pull your working yarn here until you have gone from one side to the other. If you start to pull it now to shape your arm before you have all of your stitches in, you will find that you won't be able to see where you need to work because everything's going to be pulled inwards. And I'm just going to make sure that I'm down now because I'm going to stop at 7 stitches down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. So I'll just bring myself back over to the other side. There. Pull these pins out and pull both tails until I have my arm shaped. It's really that simple. And I'm just going to bring this tail back in and out here to meet my starting tail. Give everything one last pull. Make sure I'm happy with it. And then tie, as always, tie those tails together. Put them back into the needle, onto the needle, and hide them inside the body. We'll be able to pull that so that it disappears, and we can cut them off. Now, you don't need to see me do the other side. You can just do exactly what we did here. We found the center column of stitches. We counted 3 columns to either side. We started 10 rows down, and then we made our way up until we were 3 rows down. So really, we just went up 3 stitches, didn't we? And then we tied them off. So you can pause the video here, and I will see you once you have your other arm made, and we are ready to do this duplicate stitch to make the icing on the arms. And now we're going to do what's called a duplicate stitch. Of course, if we had tried to put this row of icing on while we were on the machine, we would have had this white line all the way across. And I don't want that. I only want that on my arm. And so we do what's called a duplicate stitch. It's really, really easy. Just cut myself some of my white yarn, put it on the needle, come to the back of my arm, and make sure this hasn't gone out of focus. Good. And I'm going to say, okay, I want my band of white icing on my arm to be about here. And so I'm going to come up and I'm going to find a row of stitches here. Sorry, a column. I keep saying row. A column of stitches is where our stitches are on top of one another. A row is where they are beside each other. And I say this all the time, so I should be able to keep this straight. Now I have found my column of stitches here. So this is the stitch where I want to be white. So I'm going to bring my needle, I'll start it back out here. I'm going to bring my needle up and out the stitch that's just below it and out the center of that stitch. Leave myself a tail for tying off. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up and over this leg to the stitch above and bring my needle through. And hopefully this will make sense after you watch me do that tail out of the way a couple. And now I'm going to bring my needle back in where I started at the stitch below. And I'm going to bring my needle out, following the same row of stitches, the next stitch over. And the same thing, I'm going to come out through the center of the stitch below. And you'll see once I start pulling this, you will see how that stitch now looks like it is white. We have duplicated it. So I've come out through the stitch below. I'm going to bring my needle up and through the two legs of the stitch above. This one's probably easier to see. And now I will bring my needle in at the same point I have come out. And then I'll do the same over at the next stitch in the row. Come out through the stitch below. And as we pull it, you can see, I don't want to pull these too tight because I'd like to have what looks like a really nice icing detail there. Come up, bring it through the legs of the stitch above. Now that we can very clearly see, this is the stitch here we're duplicating. So we're coming out and back in the stitches below and above. So I've come in through the legs of the stitch above and then back in through the stitch below. And I'll go over here to this one. Oops. Out the stitch below and through the legs of the stitch above. Back in. And it's going to become a little bit tighter over on this side. But you just need to trust the process. Back through here. Back in. Now, it's up to you. You can leave your icing to stop there, or you can try and come inside. I'm going to try and catch that last stitch on the inside. Let's see if I can do it. I think it will just finish it off nicely. Back in, and I'm going to come back out to meet up with the tail I started with. Making sure I'm not coming out. Oh, what's happening? There we go. There we are. Before I tie it off, I'm going to go through and give each little leg a little bit of a tug to make sure that each of my stitches look uniform. They look like they were knitted there to start with, that it's not sort of an afterthought in this duplicating. This is a great way to add detail, especially when we are working on circular knitting machines, where it's not impossible, but it's more challenging to do just a patch of color somewhere. Okay, then I will tie these tails. I had planned to go all the way through and just do the other ones without tying off, but I've decided I'm not going to do that. So you probably didn't need to have such a long piece of yarn on there like I did. And now that, pull that, there we go. And now we have a nice little bit of icing on the other side. And you don't need to watch me do it over here again. You can do that yourself, and I will meet you when we are ready to move on to the face embroidery. You can see I have embroidered on some little creases here for the eyes and a little mouth. So just something that's really simple and not too overpowering for our gingerbread man. I'm going to take some of my cotton DK sport weight yarn. The reason I like to use cotton for my embroidery is because it doesn't leave behind any little bits of fuzz. So I'm going to start at the back of my head, and I'm going to come forward, and I'm going to start my crease here at that column of stitches that is just on the inside edge of my eye. Leave yourself a tail at the back for tying with, and I'm going to bring it down to the column of stitches that are just, now this column is not pointing in the same direction, it's now pointing upwards, but it is the one that's just beside the outside of the eye. And I'm going to come back in. Now this is where I like mine to be, but maybe you want to have your creases or put eyebrows on. It's your gingerbread man. You do your embroidery how you like. So now I'm going to bring my needle through and out the same spot up here. On the other eye, pull it. Now I don't want to pull it so that it is too tight and it begins to distort these stitches. This is the thing about doing embroidery on knitted work as opposed to crochet. And I want to make sure I've come out along the same row. Yes, I have. Okay. And I'm going to come back and make sure, I'm just eyeballing it, that I'm coming back in. That line's going to meet up like that. Yes. Okay. Now before I carry on, I am going to mark that center column of stitches again, and this is going to help me for forming my mouth. I want my creases of my mouth, I don't want it to be a great big wide mouth, so I'm going to have the corners of my mouth follow that same column down as my inside of my eyebrow. And so I'm going to bring my needle out. I like to have my mouth quite close to the eyes, so I'm actually going to have it just be just below, just that stitch below the eye. Can you see? There's that column of stitches there, and I'm coming out the stitch that's just under that bottom edge of the eye. And you will see that that's going to pull our eyebrow to form it there. Before I go any further, I'm just going to check to make sure I'm happy with how that looks. I think that looks good. Now, I've come out here. I want to make sure that I am going back in at the same spot. So this is the column that's just on the inside of the eye there, and I want to come in that one stitch down. Am I working into the same row? I am. So I'm going to come back in, and then I'm going to come out because I want to form a little smile. I don't want to have a great big one that will make my mouth look more like a V shape. So I'm just going to come out one stitch down. I hope this all makes sense, and perhaps as I'm doing it, it will make more sense. So I'm bringing my needle in to form the other corner of my mouth, but I am going to come down here, just one stitch down, and back out at that center column. You can see what happens. I have this straight across mouth, but how do I get it without hoping it just stays down? I'm going to take the needle, come over the mouth, catch it, and go right back in where I came out. And I will bring my needle back to the back of the head to meet up with my starting tail there. I can get rid of that. And you can see it catches my mouth there. And then this is where I can just tidy everything up. I'm going to give this a little bit of a tug to tighten that crease in a bit. Pull this around. Give this center one. There we go. Pull the tail. And there we go. We have our little creases on our eyes and our mouth. And just like every other time, tie these in a knot and then hide them. Be careful not to pull too tightly because you will pull the embroidery on the front all out of shape. Now this tail is a little short for getting onto the needle and being able to come back into the work. I'll show you a little trick that I do. I put my needle back in, then bring that short tail through the eye. And then it's on there, and I don't have to worry about it falling off as I'm trying to bring the needle back in. Okay, before I do anything, I'm going to come back here. Oh, it's so sweet as it is. But just 2 more steps left. The cheeks, and then the buttons. Now the cheeks are really simple to do. Just get yourself a length of your DK yarn, or whatever yarn you're using to embroider your cheeks. Now, because this is a little bit thin, I am going to double up my cheeks like that. Starting at the back, I'm going to come up and I'm going to place my cheek just right beside the corner of my mouth. So I'll come out the center of that stitch there. Make sure I have a tail at the back here. I'm going to go over just 1 stitch like this. I want to make sure that that's going to be straight across. So I think it needs to come in just a bit higher. Yeah. And then I'm going to come over to the other side. Let's see. Make sure that both of those strands are pulling. Don't pull it so tight that you pull those stitches out of shape. Good. Come over 1 stitch and make sure I'm coming in so that my stitch, the cheeks go straight across and aren't going to be accidentally angled down. Come out the back. And look, oh my gosh, it's so cute. This is what I love about putting on faces, doing the embroidery of a face. It just really makes what you're making come alive. Makes it so special. Isn't that annoying? Look, it's so short. I'm going to have to go back to the front and fix up those cheeks because I know that by having to pull that, like I just did, it's going to have made those cheeks too tight across the stitches at the front there. So I'm going to make sure that I come in and do that. Oh, look, that's looking all right, but I will fix that. So I'll just cut this off. Use my darning needle just to make sure that that looks good. And there we are. And the last step to our gingerbread man is to sew on our little buttons here. And so, like always, I am going to find that center row because this is where I want to pin my buttons. Now, I really want to have colorful buttons, but I also wanted to use what I have at home. So these happen to be the sweetest looking pair of buttons that I have in my sewing kit. And so that is what I'm using. But I would think that a really colorful pair of buttons would look great. I would love to see that. I'm just going to pin my buttons into place to make sure I'm happy with their placement. I think I'm going to move that just up a bit. There we are. Get myself a long piece of thread. And I'm going to sew both buttons at the same time. I'm going to double up my yarn so I get nice thick, not my yarn, my thread, so that I have a nice thick center there. And I'm not going to move too far away. I'm going to come in and out, making sure I'm keeping that. I want to have my buttonholes nicely up and down. Make sure I'm leaving myself a tail to tie with. I can take that pin out. And when I was trying this on this one over here, I kept having to pull my needle out over to the side. And then I thought, wait a sec, what if I sew both buttons at the same time? Because I can then bring my needle out through the buttonhole of the button below. and I can just go back and forth between both buttons. And then I don't have to worry about how do I come out from sewing on my button. I hope that makes sense. And so here we go. I'm just going to come in and out of each button until I am satisfied that they are on here firmly. Each time I'm just going to check to make sure that they are going on straight. And you can kind of give each button a little bit of a pull. And I think that will be enough. So after I go back in this last time, I'm going to come out and over here to my tail. And tie it off. Now, some of you might be experts with sewing and say to me, it was a terrible way in which I sewed on my buttons there. Go ahead and sound off in the comments if you want. I think I've done a pretty good job. And look at that. Oh, isn't that just the sweetest? There's a little gingerbread man made on your 46 or 48 pin circular knitting machine with basically no sewing. You've learned to do a duplicate stitch, and I just think that's a really nice, sweet little easy make for Christmas. I've started to put together a collection of Christmas patterns. This little hat is made on a 22 pin machine, and you can see here I've attached it to my Grogu and my lemon to make fun little Christmas ornaments, or you can leave the hat on its own. You can find the hat tutorial here in my Christmas winter playlist, where I will be adding this pattern as well as others as I go along. I hope you enjoyed that.